How to build. If you can determine some honest and simple order of existence, following those trodden ways of wisdom, which are pleasantness, and seeking her quiet and withdrawn paths, which are peace, then, and so sanctifying wealth into commonwealth, all your art, your literature, your daily labors, your domestic affection, and citizen's duty will join and increase into one magnificent harmony. You will know then how to build well enough. You will build with stone well, but with flesh better. Temples not made with hands, but riveted of hearts. And that kind of marble, crimson veined, is indeed eternal. John Ruskin.
Wow, thank you so much. And I was just noticing as you were reading, David, how apt it is for today's theme. So let me start by saying welcome everyone to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle that's sponsored by Still and Moving Center every Saturday afternoon at this time. And this quote that you just read, David, was talking about the trodden ways of wisdom and talking about seeking her quiet and withdrawn paths, which are peace. So I think that that very much leads into our topic for today, which follows very well on last week's topic. Last week's topic was head learning and soul wisdom. And the theme for this week in the almanac is the path of meditation. And I'm very pleased to introduce you to Diana Bonnici, who's been a dear friend of mine for a very long time. She's someone, as we were just talking about, does marriage and family counseling. She has been doing that for 35 years, whether as a counselor or a life coach. It's basically that same soul wisdom that comes from the kind of living meditation that she does. As I understand it, Diana was raised in the Christian tradition, and since that time has added to the wisdom that she gained there, wisdom from the Zen Buddhist tradition, in which both she and her husband are Zen Roshis. And without further ado, I'd love to pass this on over to Diana for just a little set of ideas that we could use as a springboard.
Thank you, Renee. I really appreciate it. I really want to take off the theme that for this year's almanac. It's in the introduction, you say, the theme chosen for this year from 2023 almanac is Citizens of the Future. These themes suggest some of the traits and trainings we will need. And so what I'm going to do is share my themes and trainings for the citizen of the future. And I'd like you to do the same when we get to that point. So first, I'd like you to take one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And I'd like you to take 3 big breaths. The first one, let go of where you've been and what you're thinking that you've been up to this today. The second one, let go of what you have to do afterwards. And the third one, be in the present moment. Notice how your body relaxes as you take your deep breaths. I'd like to share with you how I got involved in Zen Buddhism and meditation. My husband and I have been married 57 years, and we met when we were 17. And one of the things that brought us together is that we were both very spiritual. I went to the Lutheran church and he went to the Catholic church. And really at 17, we learned about both of them. We'd go to both churches. Well, we were married when I was 19. And when 2 weeks after we were married, he was in a motorcycle accident and we were told he'd never walk again. And he was in the hospital for 2.5 months. Well, being a 19-year-old that just got married, that had never lived outside of her parents' house, this was quite a shock. And it was also the time of the Vietnamese War, and the demonstrations were all over. So I'd be going to the hospital and there'd be National Guard there with their guns. And here I am walking down the street trying to get to the hospital. And so I started going to church at the Catholic church at 5:30 every morning. And they spoke Latin. I didn't understand a thing that they said, but I really liked the idea of just being in the silence and being in the presence of the divine and being able to, for me, the Lutheran Church didn't have any statues or anything, but for me to feel the energy of those around me, and I could just sit and breathe. And I really felt myself grounding and found some place to hold on to during this time. So what's true for me, meditation is the spiritual practice of deep listening. It's, for me, what came up for me was, how do I live and embody all parts of me in divine wisdom and share that love with others? And for me, the answer is seated meditation and also living meditation. It's a way that we can work with our lives from a place of deep listening to the divine and the wisdom within. We're all connected. And when we really come from that place, that is the place of deep listening. So for me, Zazen meditation is something that it's not a religion. It's a practice. It's how I live my life. And when I started going, let's see, I forgot to say, 10 years after we got married and that happened, we finally went to a Zen. I took a class at Sonoma State, and it was a Zen meditation class. And we went up to the Sonoma Mountain Zen Center. And my husband and I went there and we thought, we don't feel like ugly ducklings anymore. I mean, they were meditating, they were sitting. And even though I had taught it at the Lutheran Church and the Presbyterian Church, these people were sitting all day long. And at that point, we were doing daycare for 12 children. So to go and spend 10 days and have silence and to be able to just bow to someone and not to have to fix them or say anything was just heaven. So this idea of deep silence and deep listening became a really integral part of who I was. So when I do Zen meditation, I either sit on a chair or a pillow. You can sit on either one, and your back is straight, and you follow your breath. So you breathe in through your nose and you breathe really deep into your belly. And when you breathe deeply into your belly, you're expanding your diaphragm. So you're getting more air. That place 2 inches below your belly button is called the tanden area in Japanese. And that's where all the martial arts come from. You know, your aesthetic and martial arts that go to the tandem. It can be core self. It can be peaceful light, as Andy and my husband's book for children talks about the core self being peaceful light. So it's like from that place, you can start feeling the energy and you can sort of feel a warmth. And as you do that, you can start feeling your mind relax. Now, your mind is going to think, because that's what your mind does. It's supposed to think, and it's supposed to secrete thoughts. And people say, well, when I meditate, I don't think anything. Well, that can happen. But the truth is, the key with meditation is about bringing yourself back to breath. You have a thought come in, you bring yourself back to breath. You can think for a long time and still bring yourself back to breath. It's not about not thinking. It's about going underneath the thinking and not getting caught in. Suzuki Roshi used to say that when you have a thought come in, open the front door and open the back door and don't invite them for tea. The other one he said that I really liked was, be like Mount Fuji, be like the clouds going in front of the solid mountain. So thoughts are okay. People say, oh, I can't sit, I just think too much. Well, that's the time you probably need to sit, because you've got so much going on in your mind. It's a way that you can relax and just settle down. And it becomes something that you start feeling in your heart, because there's a heart-body connection. And it's almost like you feel like, for me, I feel like I'm being held by divine or touching into divine wisdom. And it's like deeply listening to the connection that we are all one, and really feeling that in your body. It's not a mind thing, it's really a body thing. When I meditate, I have my eyes open at about a 45-degree angle. And the reason I do that, Zen meditation usually has eyes open. And the reason we do that is because you live your life with your eyes open. For me, when I close my eyes, the truth is I leave my body. I like to go out and do guided imageries and all that. But if I'm going to stay present, then my eyes are open, and our eyes are like a round mirror. We're reflecting what's going on, but there's a bird. But if we think bird, we come back to breath. It's like reflecting what's there without being caught. It's living in this only moment and being aware of your breathing. That's all it is. And so I'd like to try us to take 5 breaths. And I'd like you to put, first of all, your hand on your tummy and your hand on your heart. And as you breathe in, I'd like you to feel you're filling up your vase. It's almost like there's a really beautiful vase with a heavy bottom, and you fill that with air first. And notice when you belly breathe, your belly goes out when you breathe in. And when you exhale, it goes out when it goes in. So it's kind of opposite to what we're used to doing, because people think they have to hold their breath or have their belly go in. So when you breathe in, let your belly go out. And then it comes up. And then you let the air out through your nose and your belly goes in. Notice the difference. If you feel a difference from when you first took the first 3 breaths, most people breathe through their chest, and that's a fight and flight reaction. The deeper that you breathe, the more grounded you feel. Notice if there's a difference. Notice how you feel when you take those deep breaths. And if your mind wanders, bring it back. There's no judgment. It's not, oh my gosh, I'm thinking again. It's allowing yourself to just be present. And I suggest to people that you might try 5 breaths in the morning or 5 minutes in the morning. I meditate twice a day. I meditate in the morning as soon as I get up, and I meditate at night. For me, it's an opening and closing of the day. It sets my intention for how I want to live. It makes me remember to ground and to trust divine wisdom and divine timing. And feeling guided for me. When I touch ground in that way, I feel connected to all that is. Now, as I said, for me, let's take one more breath. And take a minute and notice how you feel. So that's seated meditation. For living meditation, we take our spiritual practice into our daily life. How do I bring my spirituality, my trust in divine wisdom and divine love? How do I really know that we're all one? How do I live that in my daily life? And it's a practice. No one's perfect at it. We have our feelings and our moods and our emotions, but we come back and we take a breath. And there's a lot of compassion and love for ourselves as we practice this. And it comes out in relationships. It's living with relationship, with compassion, and then divine wisdom. So that when we talk, we're not coming from ego space. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but we're really listening and living our life with love and compassion for ourselves and others. When I live from oneness and I really practice that, I'm living the way that I want citizens of the future to live. It's coming with a sense of groundedness, a sense of openness. And how do we do that when we're practicing as a conscious choice to live our spirituality? And it can be any form of spirituality or any type of deep listening, but how do you do that? And it's motivated by love and compassion. Now, one of the things I think is really important that meditation really helps is that we can observe our thoughts and not get caught in them. This is really helpful in daily life, because usually what we do is something happens and we have a reaction. We bypass the thinking, we just act. Well, with meditation, when you learn to observe and be aware of your thoughts, you can take a moment and you can make a choice. Do I want to react or respond? Most of our reactions are from our wounded stories, or we tend to act out in ways that our ego has learned to defend ourselves. So what does it mean to live, to include we're not trying to get rid of the ego. The ego is really important. The ego helps us live in the world, but where does the ego come from? Does it come from thinking and trying to protect ourselves and put up walls? Or does it come from an open heart and love and compassion? And the more that I listen and trust, the more that I really work with living from that place of love and compassion. And I think it's really important that as we do this, the meditation gives us a grounding so that we can say, how do I choose to respond? How do I want to live my life? Even with people that are difficult. I mean, if we can really make a choice to not respond, but to react, to react and not respond, then we can be in a place that we can be of service to ourselves and others. The other important part I think that meditation brings to daily life is living in this only moment. The truth is, when I first said, take a breath, let go of the past and let go of the future, what we do is most of the time we're living in the past or the future. What does it mean to live in this present moment? The past and the future are constructs of our mind. We do not live there. They're not happening now. We need the past. We need to learn from the past, and we need to make plans from the future. But if we do that from a place of being grounded and in meditation or in silent listening or in connection to divine love, then we can make some choices for our life in a much better way than being reactive and choosing from past experience. Another thing that I think is really important with meditation is being mindful. And we talked about this last week. It's not mind, it's body, mind. It's body, heart, and core. We can make decisions because we're seeing reality as it is. We're not buffeted back and forth for what our mind is thinking, but we're really grounding into this only moment and to be mindful and aware of our thoughts and what's happening. So I want you to take another breath. Belly breathe. For me, living meditation or living spiritual practice includes some aspects or parts of ourselves, and one is compassion. How do we develop compassion for ourselves, really deep compassion for ourselves and others? Really believing that we're all inherently good and we're all one. So we can have different beliefs, we can have all the stuff that's going on in the world, but to really develop compassion, even for those that we don't agree with. And it doesn't mean I like what they do, but I can have a deep sense of compassion and understanding. Not that I understand what they're doing, but I can have compassion and understanding for them as a person because they have inherent worth and we are all one. And we have to remember that whatever we experience in our life, it affects everything because we are all one. If we're going to be angry and mad and put that energy in the universe, we're adding to that energy. We're not adding love and compassion. Another aspect is open-heartedness. How do I really be open-hearted and develop a practice of the well-being for all sentient beings, everything? How can I live with authenticity and integrity with who I am now, but also be aware that I can open my heart? And I'm not afraid that I'm going to get run over. I'm not saying no boundaries. I think we need boundaries because the compassion is for ourselves and others. The open-heartedness is for ourselves and others. Very often as people that are giving and loving, we tend to give ourselves away. We don't include ourselves in that process. So really including ourselves in the compassion and open-heartedness is really important. Another aspect for me is wisdom. It's really being open to divine wisdom and then open to understanding the suffering of the world, of trying to understand what's going on. And I can't, with my brain, I can't understand. I know there's a bigger picture, and sometimes it's really hard to take in, but it's like listening for wisdom. The wisdom is, how do I respond? What am I supposed to do? Another aspect is ethical conduct. Conduct is no harm, integrity, generosity, and honesty. Do we live with relationships with ethical conduct? Another is a meditation or spiritual practice. For me, I think this is the cornerstone, and I keep saying this because it's from that place of deep listening with faith and trust. And you can use whatever words you want, and we always do it differently, but that's the grounding with which we can live a compassionate, loving life. That's the grounding with which we learn, how do I respond when someone's mean to me? And so, yes, I have to maybe put boundaries, but how can I do that in a compassionate way? Another is skillful means. What I've been working with is, how do we communicate to people that think differently and are so different? I mean, how do we may not be able to, and we choose not to communicate because it's so different. But how can I talk to someone on and if communication is really important to me, I need to learn to speak with skillful means. That means sharing at a level that they'll understand and that we can understand together and work on communication. And I think that's missing in our world today. Everyone's talking over or under or not even listening. The other is service. What am I being called to do? How can I give and love from a place of generosity and service? Now, when I think of saving all sentient beings, I don't think that I have to literally save everyone. It's not that I have to own it. It's not that I have to fix it. It took me a long time to realize I couldn't fix anybody or anything. But it's like, it's really learning that I have to listen to what is my expression of service. For me, it may be meditation and prayers. For others, it may be holding signs up and becoming politicians or speaking out. We each have to find our own personal way of service. And two more, but one is dedication. And I think this dedication means a deeper sense of purpose. And it's not to fix or ignore the suffering in the world, but it's like, are we guided with wisdom and love to be in the world a certain way? It doesn't mean we have to do great things. It may be how I talk to the grocery man or how I talk to my spouse. It may be, how do I relate to the person that lives next door to me? So for me, the meditation, sitting meditation, is the way that I deeply listen to divine love and divine wisdom. Living meditation is, how do I take what I do and live with that in a way that's congruent and able to be of service to self and others, and not forgetting the self, but also not coming from an ego place, but from a place of deep love and caring. This whole idea of deep listening is my spiritual practice. So those are my thoughts. And what I'd like you to do is, I'd like to open it up and have it be a discussion of, how do you envision yourself as a citizen of the future? And what traits and training do you use to help yourself understand and work toward that? Thank you. I've enjoyed sharing with you.
Thank you so much, Diana. So if I could just rephrase what you said at the end, which kind of summarized everything that I heard you say all the way through. Your spiritual practice is sitting meditation, which is a matter of deep, deep listening. And you, in that state, have a chance to tune into divine wisdom. And then your living meditation is your way of putting that what you've heard, that wisdom that you've heard, putting it into action in the specific way that is appropriate for you, that is your particular calling. And it entails compassion for yourself so that you can sustain it, and of course for all others as well. Is that a kind of a summary?
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah.
And so the question that you have out with this path of meditation is, what is for each of you, what is how do you relate to this phrase of the path of meditation for you? What is your way of hearing the wisdom that you need to act upon? Right? It may not be sitting on a cushion or a chair for you, that you tune into what it is that helps you become a citizen of the future, as Diana put it so beautifully for us this year.
Mary, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you live your faith. And I would like you, if you wouldn't mind, to share how you relate to that and how you live that in your daily life.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you, Renee, for wonderful opportunities to learn new things. Born and raised by a Catholic. It wasn't until I was really in my 50s that I took that to heart and was saying the rosary. Probably was because my daughter was taking off from the mainland without any any way to contact her, and all I could do was to give it to God. And I haven't stopped. And thinking of your comments on how to do that, I surround myself with like-minded people because I get so much support and so much wisdom from others who have gone through trials and tribulations, who are going through them, who are now older, and we can look back on things and say, oh, okay, that's what happened then. I can see things differently now. And basically, I find myself, I pray, rote prayers, there's nothing wrong with them. And in a way, it's secure. It's, you know, I can say the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be, time, day and night. You know, if I'm washing my hands, I will say them. And it certainly, I believe, helps to lower my blood pressure, because we can't not worry about the things that are going on in our lives, whether we have children or not. There's always somebody who is in front of us that needs something. And whether it's physical, mental, financial, just a smile can really help a person's heart. So yeah, mainly, and again, the older I've become, the more I feel I can let go and let God. Amen.
And
Thank you, Mary.
when I talk about prayer for me, Mary, that's talking to God. I get to share with him my thoughts and my feelings and my prayers and my and surrender. And so for me, I see that as me talking to God and sharing and being able to share what's going on in my heart. And then for me, I found for me and is listening. And I think prayers are really important. I say them all day long too, at different times. And I think that there's ways that we have to remind ourselves throughout the day. How do we remind ourselves throughout the day to live from a place of love and compassion? So thank you, Mary.
Yes, and I have one more thing that I'd like to add, because I was just reading, you know, I have little books in different places throughout the house. And it was a question about doubt. And they talked about Thomas, the apostle, and everybody thinks of him as doubting Thomas. Yeah. But what doubt, what the author of the book was trying to get across is that doubt is actually good, because then we can research, we can find out, okay, if I'm not sure about something, I'll find out what the real truth is. And of course, it's two ways. You can think of doubt as something to expand your intelligence, expand your mind, expand your experience, or you can take it as a dark side where you just doubt everything and you don't give anything a chance. So I thought that was pretty good, how doubt can be many things, but to take it to a positive spin is to investigate, to ask questions. Thank you.
One of the sayings that I like is, doubt is the handmaiden of truth. And it's what you're saying. If we're doubting, let's find out what our truth is.
May I chime in?
Please.
Please.
Like you could keep me from chiming in?
We don't want to. We don't want to stop you.
Oh, just following along with what Mary said so well about prayers and the regularity of prayers. I know that in certain yoga practices, the ones that are most popular are the ones where they do the same thing every practice. You know, those practices, Bikram and others, where it allows you to deepen. If you're not thinking about, well, what are they saying? What's coming next? it allows you to just deepen into that present moment, because we know that right after we reach our arms up, we're going to bow forward, and we're just able to more turn inward. In the yoga practice, we call that practice, or abhyasa. I mean, it really means to repeat, because we are engineered around habits, right? Most 99% of our day is some habitual behavior, and otherwise, it'd be impossible to get through a day trying to learn everything all over again. So I really, that resonated with me about the value of repeating prayers, even the same prayers over and over again. It brings us into that. With regard to your question about how to be a citizen of the future, and this is one that's been a kind of a key word for me in there, is consideration. Having consideration for others. It's a real simple, very simple truth that sort of smooths the edges around relationships. And relationships are complicated enough, and they're wonderful in that sense. I think that something that Mary said also, I think about the rough edges that we've got. We're embodied so that we can grow and learn. And we do that through relationships. And those pesky people, the ones that really rub us the wrong way, are the best teachers. We have such an opportunity to grow. What I'm studying, is marriage and family. So it's all about systems theory, and it's about that everything makes sense in context. So when we think about somebody who's acting a certain way that we don't really kind of understand or agree with, particularly if we don't agree with it, if we can take a moment and step back and go, that's their truth, and it makes sense in the world that they have lived in. And for me, when I can remember that and step back and realize this thought that I'm having about they're doing it the wrong way, or whatever I might be feeling, is really just, no, I'm not walking in their shoes. I really have no place to judge from. And so maybe it allows me to then step back and ask the question, well, what's up in your world that has you acting like this? And maybe that also creates the opportunity in the relationship that allows me to express how that behavior might be impacting me. Yeah. And for the moment, I'm complete. Thank you, Diana. And thank you, Mary.
I'd like to pick up on what David just said, because we've walked so many miles in our own shoes. And to me, that's really the focus of what's going on here. It's not two forms of meditation, but our practice is really making them one. Basho, the poet, said, "On this road walks no one, this autumn eve." And that's kind of the trick. I mean, how does no one walk on this road on this autumn eve? There is always us. And as Diana said, compassion is wonderful, but compassion is basically dualistic. Me and another person. I have compassion for you. And so there's that, and then there's no one. There's that wonderful point of letting God, and then you're one, and that's the oneness. So how do you put those two together, of the oneness and me, with all my shadow self and with all that stuff that comes in while I'm sitting on the cushion, and not just my knee pain, but my past pain and my future pain and all the pain that just comes, it arises. And so how do you do that kind of thing? Dogen Zenji, the Soto Zen master, said, it's like swimming on the surface of the ocean while walking on the bottom of the sea. Not as two, while walking on the bottom of the sea. Walking on the bottom of the sea, you're one with the ocean. On the top, all the waves, all the action, all the stuff is happening. How do you swim on the surface of the ocean while walking on the bottom of the sea? And that's my sort of 2 cents, is how do you do that kind of practice? And again, that whole metaphor of this reality is one bright pearl, one shining pearl. But from the point of view of the pearl, it's just a piece of sand irritating yourself constantly. That's what creates a pearl. So what do we do with that? How do we make all that one? And I'm not saying that is a criticism. That essentially, I think, is what Diana was saying. But it's good to then think of the two as one. They're always there. You're swimming on the surface while walking on the bottom.
One of the things I've been working with is the difference, the combination of soul perspective and human 3D perspective. Now, I see them kind of in one, it's like the yin yang, they're one, but we have our soul perspective, which we can live and work from and see things from. There's a divine plan I don't understand. There's this and that. And so as well as we have our 3D experience that I'm grieving the loss of, or I don't like this and I like that. So it's like we can have both. They are one. But for me to acknowledge both and be able to hold my 3D perspective grief, perhaps, while understanding it's the right thing that needs to happen at this time within the world. And so it is all one, but it's allowing ourselves as humans to feel both and having them come together so that they can support us in the journey.
There. Okay. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave early today, so I'll chime in now. For me, since most of my day is spent working with words, either by writing or speaking, I find the greatest need and aid is to go in another room and in a special chair and work at attaining quietude. And it may take an hour to actually reduce and eliminate all the chatterbox noise that gets into your psychic nature, and to actually attain an internal quietude. And then into your consciousness comes thoughts, and they may be very helpful thoughts. They may be very intuitive. They may be somewhat creative, and they're not what you planned to necessarily think about or whatever. So so if I were to say, well, what's meditation? Meditation for me is attaining a deep quietude. And then thoughtful thoughts can enter into your consciousness, and they may be very helpful in solving a problem, or it may just be very interesting because you hadn't expected those particular thoughts. So, and then at a certain point, that's going to end, and then it's time to really get up and do something, take a walk or whatever. So that's my suggestion, is attain let a state of quietude take over.
Thank you.
Hi, I would like to say that probably the most efficient, I don't mean it that way, but for example, my sister was in a car accident. She ended up in the hospital, and it was all sorts of chaotic things. And she lives in Minnesota, so there was nothing like I could get in a car and go help her. And she wasn't answering her phone, and she wouldn't answer, and she wouldn't answer, and she wouldn't answer. And I was laying on the couch. I took a little nap, and I woke up and this voice said, "Call Jenna right now." So I went and called her right now, and by God, she answered the phone. I knew it was coming. I could feel it. There's a certain intuition that I get at times, and I just know if you do it right now or whenever it says to do it. So I feel like it comes from the oneness. I meditate every day too, and it gets stronger. And the more you listen to it and act on it, the stronger it seems to get.
Sounds as if everybody is talking about achieving a state, a quietude, a meditative state, a receptive state, where we're able to take in what we need to be able to act effectively. I think actually it's not such a bad word, Beth, to act effectively in the world. Skill in action definitely is enhanced, it seems to me, by taking those times of not being in action, to really calm ourselves, center ourselves, so that this in-out oneness can more effectively merge, that I'm hearing Bob talking about. And Bob, as you were speaking, it was really helpful to me. I've had for a very long time this conflict. Every time I hear about putting on your own mask first before putting on your child's on the airplane, it just seems so selfish. And I know I have to get over that. But I've also kind of struggled with this idea of self-compassion for a long time. That also, to me, seems as if it can verge into selfishness. And yet, if there really is no separation between me and you and anything else in the whole universe, and if I desire to live a compassionate life, why would that exclude this being in a body that is traveling under the name Renee? Why would that be excluded? No reason, right? So if it's going to be compassion, it needs to be all-inclusive compassion, right? Otherwise, all of a sudden I've made that separation. Oh, I'm different from all the rest. Beth, what were you going to say?
I was going to say the reason why you put your mask on first is because you're no good to the child if you pass out.
Right, I know.
You probably knew that. Okay.
Yeah, I know. It
One of
just
the things- one of the things that I think that when I talk to people is that if our vessel is empty and we haven't filled it with self-care or however we do that, then we're giving out of a need. It may be a need to be seen. It may be a need to be helpful. It's coming from more of an ego place. When we're giving out of a fullness of love and that we have taken care of ourselves and we are feeling filled, then we're giving out of love instead of out of a need to get something back. Because service doesn't, what I was talking about it, is not include ego aggrandizement. It's about you do it because that's what you're called to do, or that's where it is. So I think what you talk about of taking care of the self, that's why talking about compassion and open-hearted for ourselves is really important, because people think they're giving, and they're empty, and there is points that maybe you have to do that. But if we don't really fill our own heart with love and feel that, then it seems like sometimes it can come out of a different place.
That's a really great point.
I think too, you can ask that if you're unseparated from the one, what are you not separated from? What is inseparable? And I would say it is life itself. Suzuki Roshi once said, if you want to tame your mind, give it a big field. A field much bigger than either or thinking, that includes the ability to have many options, openness. So that's kind of a sense too, that you're not shutting yourself off from the world. This very world is important, this life, and you're responding to life. You're letting life come to you. That's part of swimming on the surface of the ocean.
While others consider what they might want to chime in and add to the conversation, I was going to just thinking about my history of meditation and kind of where I learned it even before I knew what it was that I was learning. My father had a practice of he would come home for lunch. He would have his lunchtime meal before going back to his shop, and then he would lay down for 20 minutes, not to sleep, just lay on his back. And he worked with some precision engineering kinds of things, pretty technical problems that had to be worked out. And so he described, and I didn't realize what I had learned until much later, but what he would describe is he would just let the answers come to him as he would relax. And later I learned that I think maybe it was maybe Edison who had the practice of taking a glass of water and thinking about the problem and saying, the answer is at the bottom of this glass, and he would just drink the water. A lot of techniques for finding that. It wasn't until I actually took my first yoga class before the idea of meditation was sort of revealed to me, but I had learned it on my own much earlier, and it's still my practice today. I just lay down on my bed. That's my meditation space, and I lay down and I call it the reset, and it's virtually 20 minutes. I can turn over to look at the clock and the hand sweeps to the 0 bar. It's that close, and it's just been with me my whole life, and I'm just thank you, Dad.
Yeah. What a great gift he gave you.
I'd like to ask about this idea of a path. And like the path of meditation, what does that add to the conversation? I think for me, knowing that I don't have to be the world's greatest meditator, that that it's something that's progressive. Also, maybe knowing that each of us follows our own paths. So for me, in some ways, a moving meditation can be the most effective for the person living in this very active body. That's sometimes when the greatest clarity and concentrated consciousness can happen, and sometimes really big ahas start flowing through. It's also a great way for me to be in connection with others if, for example, if it's one of the classes that I'm taking, or particularly it's a class that I'm teaching, a movement class that I'm teaching. So just being okay with this path of meditation, not necessarily being on a cushion or a chair, but could be very much on my feet in motion, which is how we got, by the way, our logo for Still and Moving Center, and just the idea of we could hold a still center in the midst of motion.
Well, I think that's the gift, though. Renee, I think the gift is we each have to find our own way of connecting to our inner wisdom, and whether it be through a church, through not a church. I spoke to a woman yesterday, and she felt when she walks in the desert, that's her meditation. She likes to walk in the desert. And so, if you look at the whirling dervishes, you look at all the different forms of seated meditation, thinking and watching and naming and guided imagery. So I think the gift is just finding what works for us. And it may be just a swimming. I don't know what it is for people, but it's finding how do you connect with what feeds your soul. It's not necessarily has to look any particular way. It's just, and I think what Mary said, when we're with a group of people, sometimes being able to really have a group that's helps support us is really important, because if we're not supported, it's easy to go off. And so I think that it's any way that we find that. And yoga is a beautiful way to have a meditation, because you're in your body and you're present in the moment. And I'm doing Tai Chi now, and that's been amazing. Again, a different form of moving meditation. So I think that each of us has to find our own expression of that.
I love the walking on the bottom of the sea metaphor a lot. I love to body surf. And so I'm near this area called Point Panic. Right. And so I thought, well, there's a lot that I don't know about what's underneath there. So first time I went out was just with my snorkel and goggles, because I wanted to know what was going on down below so that I could swim comfortably on top of the sea. So I really take that metaphor to heart. Because when you're on top of the sea and you don't know what's going on down there, it's a little crazy up in here. Fear comes in and whatnot. And then I had the good fortune that one of the locals that was there, he said, well, don't take the last left. And what I realized, don't take the first left, because if you take the left and then there's another one right behind you, you're going to be on the rocks. So just a little bit of wisdom that came from one of the locals, just sharing that there are inherent dangers that you might not think about. So taking that little extra time to tune into what's going on down below and up ahead was very useful for me.
Along those same lines, I heard someone refer to the Heart Sutra, which is the great teaching of emptiness, as the heart attack sutra. Eventually, it'll scare the crap out of you.
Yeah, that everything that we think exists is actually emptiness. Yeah, that's pretty scary. That's hilarious.
And it relates to the path, because something has to motivate you to take the next breath if you're sitting on the cushion, or take the next step. You can't stop. That's why it's a path as well. And that's effort. I mean, I think someone talked about doubt, Mary, about doubt. And in Buddhism, we have three things that are inseparable from each other: great doubt, great faith, and great effort. And they all go together. You know, you can't just have faith without also looking inside and doubting a little bit of all that stuff you know. Knowledge, you'll never get to the end through your intellectual mind. That's one thing that I think yoga and Tai Chi and meditation all kind of give you, is that your mind is not going to give you that answer. You're in this dualistic world, and somehow you've got to get a non-dualistic attitude. And then you go forward, then you're moving. Constantly dualistic, but with a non-dualistic attitude.
I think that's where beginner heart mind comes in for me with the path, that we're always beginners. I don't care how long you've been meditating. I don't care what you've been doing. You're still going to be faced with all the same things that everyone is. And sometimes you're going to doubt, and sometimes your meditation is silent the whole time. And sometimes there's too much thinking. So, and it's like, if we have a beginner's heart mind, then we're open to whatever it is at that moment, and realizing it is all one, and that it's okay, that we don't. And I think that's the other thing about not having to perform to be loved, or not having to do meditation or prayers or look a certain way or do something, that we are, and what I said in the beginning, we're inherently love and divine love. And if we are all one, that's who we are. And we don't have to do anything. It's just to help ourselves to live in a way that's congruent with how we want to show up in the world.
I think that's the trick of finding the middle way. In other words, you're not kind of focused on what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad, what's enlightened and non-enlightened. You know, I've heard one person was contrasting enlightenment with endarkenment, that those two kind of are, pretty close together. And if you lock into saying, "Oh, I'm enlightened, that's the way I'm going, that's for me," then you're leaving a lot on the cushion, and it's you.
Well, I'm seeing the time. So I'd like to take a moment to tell you about next week. Well, somebody, if you'd be so kind, prepares to give a vote of thanks to our speaker, Diana. Next week, we're going to be talking about climbing mountains. And I don't know how many of us are physically doing that these days. And yet I think in terms of the analogy of climbing mountains, oh my goodness, we can find a lot to think about, to heart about, to converse with one another about, because we are all internally, I suspect, climbing a lot of mountains. And at the same time, we do have a speaker who actually does so. It's somebody who has been rock climbing since teenage years and is now somewhere in his 50s, I think. He's still training Navy SEALs in this skill. So he's really somebody who knows whereof he speaks. His name's Dave Griffith. And so he's going to be our presenter for next week for climbing mountains. Little while later, a couple of weeks after that, we're going to have the topic of training our mind, and our own David Sanders is going to be presenting that for us. So that'll be wonderful too. So is there anybody who would like to give our wonderful presenter for today, our wonderfully brave presenter for today, a vote of thanks for what she did to start us off?
Yeah, well, I'm more than happy to. I live in the place of acknowledging and appreciating Diana, having the gift of being able to work with the recordings. I've sort of separated out many of Diana's little gems because she just these pearls constantly coming out. And so Diana, I wanted to acknowledge you and thank you so much for your vulnerability to take this on. I know I've asked you a few times if you would do this, and it's always been a little bit, yeah. And you just found your moment, and I really appreciate the depth of wisdom that you brought to it, and bringing your personal story into it. I really, really appreciate the courage and the willingness to share your wisdom with us and your heart. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you all so much. I appreciated being able to share with you.
Mm-hmm. I want to keep that sentence that you gave us. Doubt is the handmaiden of truth.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. And just so much of your life experience just came pouring through for us to imbibe. And
Thank you.
just can't thank you enough, Diana. Thank you so much.